Alright, I'm in. Not yet. I'll come back for it if I need it. Alright, fair enough. I'll do 1, 2, and 3. Huh? Yeah, you won't hear me. I'll be onto that road somewhere.
SeaJay, your favorite scuba diver here with Deep South Divers. Today's job is we are inspecting a series of 3 culverts, culvert pipes that run underneath of the causeway that goes onto the Parris Island Marine Corps Recruit Depot. Parris Island is in fact an island. It's just off the coast of the mainland South Carolina in the low country. And there's 2 causeways that you have to access to be able to get on and off of the island. And one of them, they noticed, I guess the maintenance crews noticed that there were some weird sinkholes that were developing on one of the causeways right over these culverts. And so on further inspection, we found that there were holes underneath of the road that were literally large enough to be able to drive to be able to park a vehicle or be able to park a truck. Huge holes underneath of the pavement. It was a miracle that it hadn't collapsed yet. But my job today is to inspect these culvert pipes to see if they had collapsed and see if we can find an explanation for the sinkholes. This video will probably be given to each one of the contractors that bid on tearing up the road, refilling the causeway, and repaving the affected area. So it's important that they know the scope of work, whether or not these culverts need to be replaced. And so I'm taking the camera in with me with lots of light to inspect and see if I can find any obvious damage, any collapsed culverts, and any holes, that kind of stuff. So I'm thoroughly inside of the culvert that runs underneath of that causeway at this point in the video. Probably about halfway across the road. And you'll notice that I have not found any obvious damage. I see no debris piles. I see no crushed culverts. And I'll press forward until I come out the other side if it's clear. So the camera I wear on my mask, so that you guys can see exactly what I'm seeing. And the camera has a series of lights that are that surround the camera, so that you can see. And of course, I've got a longer range light in my hand there. Shocking visibility. This is about 4 or 5 feet of visibility, which is outstanding visibility, and not normally something that we see. Very end of the culvert here. This is the tidal side of the culvert. There's like a seam there. I was kind of shocked to see that, and that may be significant. I'm not sure, but this right here is sort of the end of the culvert, sort of a sluice box.
Fantastic! No debris, no piles, no nothing. Headed back, we'll do
So that wall right there helps to keep water on one side. You know, there's a really good view of that seam that's right there at the end of the culvert. We haven't been able to establish it, but it's possible that that seam could be leaking and therefore be responsible for dirt and sand that makes up the causeway being sucked out, which would create the sinkhole under the road and beside each side of the road. Anyway, that wall helps to keep water on one side of the of that causeway, you know, at sort of a consistent level, and it creates like a saltwater lake, real nice estuary, real pretty area. Another thing that it does is it improves visibility. So being able to see 4 or 5 feet inside of these culverts is really impressive. Usually the visibility in this area is maybe 1 foot, 6 inches to a foot. So the camera has lights on it that cast very broad beams, just sort of light up the whole area, which is great for filming. But I've brought that longer range light. It's got a heavier spot on it, and it throws light better. See, they're checking out my hands. I've got some epoxy on my glove, stuck to my glove, that was left over from a Coast Guard job that we recently did. But at any rate, that light casts a beam further, and the primary reason why I have that is to look for critters. You know, look for biology in the culverts. That lake is a popular area for alligators, and I would really like to be able to have a further warning than be right up on an alligator sleeping down there. So that's really what I'm looking for. There are alligators. I'm also looking for debris, anything that could be responsible for any sort of damage, that could be responsible for the loss of sand on the causeway. Again, early warning would be better. If there is a damaged area, it may not be stable. And so I'm really sort of looking into the distance as far as I can in order to be able to make sure I don't come up on damage that could collapse on me.
Good. No damage, nothing. That one's flowing pretty good, right? That one's not flowing at all. I want to do that one. Yeah, that one's flowing. That means that one's a little bit lower. So I'm going to do that one next, because that way I can avoid as much current as possible. That one's going to be the longest one. That's next. 1, 2, 3. All the way to the end. Yeah, he saw me. Just, sand and rock, pebble. You'll see on the camera. I mean, it's 8 inches maybe. It might be. We'll find out.
So I'm going to check my gauges there, make sure that I've got lots and lots of breathing gas. Running out of air inside of that culvert would be a catastrophe, so
I think the problem is between
definitely
them.
checking, making sure that everything is good.
I think the problem is between them, but we'll find out. See you on the other side.
So, the gentleman there in the blue shirt, that is my tender. That is Chandler. And the guy up on the hill is Jim Rubel. And I'm explaining to him that really I'm seeing no damage inside of the culvert that I expected to see damage. And I'm telling him that I suspect that the sinkhole is between. You see that silk cloud right there? Something just took off. So I'm on kind of high alert here. Just sort of watching. Big old stone crab right there. Watch this. See that silk cloud? Something just took off. And my reaction there, where you hear me talk, it's because I got smacked in the face. And I'm back into my silk cloud here, kind of back up a little bit. And what I had gotten hit with, and it took me a second to sort of realize it, but I'd gotten hit in the mouth with the tail end of an alligator. So now, right now, I'm doing all kinds of calculations in my head, trying to figure out. Let's see, I'm going to chase him further in here, and I wonder if he can get over that wall or if I'm going to meet him at some point. There's that silk cloud again. He only moved back a little bit. I'm chasing him into the culvert. So I'm moving real slow, and I've got that light pressed out into the darkness as much as possible, because I would really like to see him before he sees me. Now, as a generalization, coming up on a gator underwater, they're usually sleeping, hibernating, especially at this temperature. The water temperature is about 54 degrees. They're not real active. And when they're sitting underwater like that and they're not real active, they're real, I wouldn't call them docile, but they're just slow, sort of lethargic. So I don't have a lot of fear, but I don't want to come up on them either. So now when they're sitting at the surface, they're a lot more likely to attack. And so I'm checking the surface there for the alligator that just hit me in the face. I'm looking for the reflection in his eyes. I don't see any gator eyes, so I'm going to cruise along here. He's somewhere up in here. Well, they generally don't attack humans, especially underwater. But he may, be defensive against me. He may consider me a threat. So I just want to go real slow. Pop to the surface, look for eyeballs. No eyeballs. Remember, I'm invading his territory, right? I know he's not going to think I'm food. I mean, a 3 or 4 foot alligator isn't going to attack a 6 foot human, but unless they're territorial, if he's offended that I'm in his space and he doesn't want me there, there could be an attack. So I'm just on high alert. It's pretty freaky knowing that you're in this very confined space, and you're not alone. You're not alone with something that's not human, So I'm still looking for a debris pile or any collapse of the culvert. Looking for eyeballs. Now, as I get towards the end of this culvert, the chances go up significantly that he's going to be there. So I'm checking everything out, going nice and slow. There's something sticking out of the ceiling here. Very strange. It's wood. And I assume that that was placed there when they built the culvert. You know, when they built the causeway. Which would be many decades ago, so... just want to make sure I don't whack that with my tank or something, you know? Still waiting to see a gator. The only time I've ever been really threatened by an alligator was when they were guarding a nest. And there's not going to be any nests here. Nests are dry, they're up in the marsh. So I'm coming up on the riprap here that's all that crushed rock. Towards the very end, you see sunlight peeking through. And I'm looking for it. There's that seam again. So the West Culvert also has the seam at the very end. I'm pretty convinced that that gator is here somewhere, so I'm looking at all the nooks and crannies. Nothing. Everything seems clear. He must have gone over the wall.
All right. You guys see me? You see the gator go? Yeah, I chased him out. I couldn't tell. I think about 3 or 4 feet. Well, he went this way, that's all I know. And he ain't here now. Alright, I'll see you on the other side. What? I got pretty good clarity. I got about 4 feet of viz, something like that. Same deal. Pipe's in great shape. Yup. We'll find out. Alright, I'll see you over on the other side.
Now the return dive, of course, is a whole lot less stressful. I mean, I've just been through there. I know what's there, and you know, and what's not there. So there's that riprap again. Grabbing my gauges, just making sure that the air supply is good, and checking temperature, checking for dive time. You know, the max depth on this dive was maybe 6 feet. I mean, it's you know, pretty shallow dive. I mean, it's, you know, a lot of places won't even call it a dive technically, but nonetheless, I'm very confined, very restricted, and you know, I want to make sure that I make it out of this culvert alive. You know, dives with restrictions and confined areas like that are a specialty when it comes to diving, and it's not something that you want to do, you know, without proper training. So, you know, I've been through the training in order to be able to handle situations like this. I don't recommend it for everybody, and if you're thinking about doing something like that and you're a diver and you've got access to the gear, just, you know, stay out of that stuff until you've been properly trained for confined space diving. Sunlight is always a welcome sight. So you can hear my reaction to seeing some of the local biology that's not exactly friendly. It's venomous.
I got his tail. Whack! He turned tail on me so quick. He must have, because he went that way.
That's me talking about the encounter with the alligator.
Going back's easy. I know what's there already. Alright.
Alright, we're going to penetrate the final culvert pipe there. You see that there's some cinder block sitting right out in front of the opening. And there's a little bit more debris here. This is all just marsh grass. It's nothing that's fallen or collapsed. But, you know, I know that there's an alligator locally, and so I'm going to take my time on this one especially because they really like that debris, the marsh grass, and that kind of stuff. So this is very much an indication of a place where an alligator might call home. So you can see I'm a little more cautious this time. Looking for eyeballs and reflections and that kind of stuff. I'm also looking for silt trails, right? So if I see a silt cloud in the water, an unexplained silt cloud, it's probably because there's something in there with me. So I'm using the throw on that light, you know, the beam, to see as far ahead as I possibly can. Now you can't hear it on the camera, but one of the things that I'm hearing is a low growl, and that's an alligator's way of saying you're in my space. They growl, they make a low guttural threat, and I keep hearing something like that. And so it's really kind of making me nervous, thinking that I might be in his territory. It turned out not to be the guttural growl of an alligator, much to my relief, obviously. But really, it was a set of bubbles that had sort of lodged itself in my gear. See a nice big fat stone crab there. Listen, these guys are like 10 inches wide. I mean, they're big suckers. But anyway, the bubbles in my wing, every time I moved a little bit, they would flow from one side to the other, and they'd make this sound that sounded to me at the time like like an alligator's growl, because I was so sensitive about it, you know. And at some point or another in this third dive, I realized that what was going on, and that it wasn't a threat. So you see me stopping and repeatedly looking for eyeballs. That's my own silt cloud that I caused. That's me listening to the bubbles in my wing, thinking that it could be something else. Watching for silt. Feeling very much like I'm not alone down here, you know? So at this point I've been going so slow, there's a constant flow towards the opening. So when I'm penetrating, the flow actually moves from me towards the opening that I'm going to. And so every time I move, I'm going so slow that the silt is catching up with me. I'm having a difficult time establishing whether or not I'm causing the silt or if something else is causing the silt. But the bubbles in my wing moving from one side to the other, I keep hearing, and I keep thinking that I'm coming across that same alligator, or maybe a different one. Maybe its mother. That's why I'm inspecting everything like I am. Obviously, no debris pile, no obvious damage, there's no collapse. Some big crabs down here, though. Trying to lighten my mood a little bit there. Telling him to get. Yeah, from elbow to elbow, that crab is probably 12 or 14 inches. He's a pretty big boy. That's a blue crab. And I just want to make sure that he doesn't take a chunk out of me when I go by. There's that seam again. So all three culverts have that seam. I haven't come across that alligator, so I'm looking heavy into, along the wall and stuff. Another really huge crab. I want to make sure I don't step on him and hurt him, or get a chunk of skin taken out. Those guys are pretty big.
This one's about half full of sediment. Maybe not quite, a third full. But there's no debris pile, and the concrete culvert is intact. Yeah, the floor of the pipe is in good shape. It's just under the sediment. I mean, I can't see the structure. All right, I'm ready to turn. I'll see you on the other side. All right.
Another quick view of that seam. That may be responsible for those sinkholes. But I don't know what the likelihood is, but it's possible. So now I'm going to cruise back. I have a lot more confidence, obviously, going back. So the return dive is going to be significantly shorter than the penetration dive. So I believe that through this series of dives, we were able to establish that the culverts are structurally intact, and that the loss of sand that's causing the sinkholes appears to be between the culverts themselves. Although that seam at the very end there may be the reason why sand is being sucked out. I guess the engineers will have to figure that one out. So once again, I'm checking for venomous or poisonous biology. Trying to avoid those huge crabs that would love to get a piece of me, and of course, avoiding the alligators. But at this point, I feel very little threat from alligators. I've chased them out. I know there was one. I don't know if there was actually one in this culvert or not. But at some point or another, I did realize that it was bubbles in my wing that were making that low growl noise, and not, in fact, an alligator, which is great news. And of course, sunlight at the end is always a welcome sight. There's those cinder blocks again. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.